Welcome to Insights for Manufacturing, the podcast that supports the UK manufacturing sector. Hosted by Jeff Beecham, the manufacturer's recruiter. Hello and welcome to Insights for Manufacturing. I'm delighted to welcome my guest today, June Hogan, who's an outplacement specialist and career coach and director of Wildwood Coaching. Welcome to the show today, June. How are you?
Oh, great. Thanks, Jeff. And lovely to be here, as they say on these things.
Absolutely. So we're going to be having a natter today about outplacement. So this is very much a sort of, I suppose a lot of people see it as an HR sort of related topic. It's definitely, in the zone of people, and, I'm in the people business. And I've got to say, there seems to be a gradual movement towards businesses becoming a bit more people-centric. I know there've been a number of polls recently about sort of leadership skills, particularly from CEO down, in the number one skill that's needed more than anything is empathy. And I guess that sort of gives us a bit of hope that, more businesses will deliver on creating and sustaining a great culture rather than just paying it some lip service and ticking a box, really. So there's hope where there's people providing services for people. There's hope that employees will be looked after. So it's going to be an interesting discussion. Just before we go into detail about outplacement, June, it's probably worth noting, in my 23 years in recruitment, I'm still amazed at the difference in effort that organisations put into hiring staff as opposed to retaining them. And I suppose the outcome of that is the need for outplacement on occasion. So would you like to give a sort of overview as to what you do? What is outplacement support?
Yeah, and it's a term that I never had even heard of, outplacement support, in my early career, because I worked for a automotive business that had no compulsory redundancies trade union agreement. So outplacement support wasn't something that was offered. There were people that left voluntarily, and they would be given this kind of mysterious folder, which we won't talk about. And it was only offered to sort of senior people. So essentially, outplacement support is a service which helps those individuals who are leaving the organisation through redundancy or through settlement agreements that can be for other reasons. And it helps them to understand the skills and the techniques and the support, gives them the support they need to find their next role quicker and transition into that role more efficiently, more effectively. And essentially, it's someone who's going to be that partner, someone who's going to work with you on an individual or a group basis, depending on what the business need is, to help individuals to go out into the job market and position themselves in the right way, understand what they need to do, how they need to go about finding a job, and also working on some of the mindset, the confidence piece, and all of that which goes with redundancy.
Yeah. And I suppose, when businesses make the decision or it's forced upon them that they have to, make people redundant, or perhaps, there might be performance management issues and people are exited from businesses. The individuals on the receiving end of that are quite often, distraught. It can send them into a state of panic, uncertainty. They lose their confidence, and often the news is broken to them and they just didn't see it coming. So why does outplacement support matter so much for the individual? First of all, we'll talk about the company a little bit more in a second.
Yeah, I've had personal experience of redundancy. So I've managed redundancy programs during my career, but I've also been on the other side of the table. And I can still vividly remember what it feels like to hear those words, your role is at risk of redundancy. And I genuinely did not hear anything else after those words were said to me. And, I'm in the HR, I've done this many times, and yet it was such a shock. And I walked out of that room and, I didn't know what to do. I didn't know where to turn. It felt like my world had fallen apart. And that's not an exaggeration, because when somebody tells you those words that you're, potentially, and it is your role is at risk, it's not you're going to be made redundant because there's a process to follow.
Yeah.
But it does cause an emotional response. And so it's a life-changing event to lose a job, much like, kind of bereavement or divorce or any of those other sort of life-changing events. And you kind of have specialists that might help you in those situations, counsellors or solicitors or, mediators or whatever. So outplacement support, in that sense of it being a life-changing event, is there for the individual. And it really matters to individuals because our jobs are more than just source of income. They're more than that, those thoughts around how am I going to pay the bills? Those are the most immediate thoughts that most people tend to have. Yep. But also when you're losing your job, you're losing the friendships that you've made at work. It's your sense of purpose. It's your reason to get up in the morning. Okay, some mornings you might not want to get up and go to work, but essentially it provides routine and structure. Yep. It helps with self-belief and self-worth. There's so much attached to a job that when that is threatened, when that job goes away, outplacement support is there to help those individuals to work through all of that emotion, to help process some of that, because you can't go out into the job market if you're an emotional kind of wreck, and you're not going to present yourself. And this from working with candidates. Yeah, so it helps you with some of that, and then it moves on to the practical stuff. Okay, so let's figure out how do we sort your CV out, prepare you for interviews and all that kind of good stuff, which most people that I work with have either not done for a long time, or some people have never had to do that. They've never had to look for a job because they found a job through friends, or they've been headhunted. Yep. Or one guy I always remember, he said, I left school on the Tuesday and I was employed on the Thursday, and I've only ever worked for this one company. So, there's a skill to doing this kind of stuff. And, you need to be in the right frame of mind in order to sort of put yourself out there. So outplacement support, it absolutely does matter to individuals. And I'm passionate about it. And I see the difference that it makes in the results that people can get from it.
Yeah. Well, that's a real value add for you, in your career, within your business. It's seeing the individual go from a state of disarray and uncertainty to, making that journey and progressing, and hopefully, being in a better place to land the next position. And would I be right in saying that the outplacement support is as effective, regardless of whether it's at leadership level or sort of shop floor level? Because I know businesses, sometimes if there's, multiple redundancies, organisations might retain an outplacement specialist for, a volume of workers. But then I've also known organisations to use outplacement support for, an individual executive that might be exiting the business. So is it as effective at either end of that scale, or are there any differences in the approach?
Yeah, I mean, that's a really good question, because I've worked with individuals at both ends of that scale. So a client at the moment is somebody who's a chef. They found themselves, and their business wanted to offer them redundancy, and I've got a CFO that I'm working with as well. So I think outplacement support can work at all levels in an organization. But fundamentally, it's about understanding what does that individual need. So whilst I have packages of support that we can tailor, or that, packages that are kind of standard stuff, when I or any of my associates meet with an individual, we want to get to know and understand them. What are their challenges, and where are they at? Some people will come to you and say, I have no idea what I want to do. They're struggling with their redundancy. They're just completely stuck. And that's totally understandable. Other people will say, I just want to get my CV up to date. I want to get out there. I want to find a job. I need to find a job. And they just want to move into action very quickly. So I think it can be effective at all levels. And the difference in the approach is, typically the more senior you are, the longer it will take you to find a job. And that's just the reality of life. And you'll see this from dealing with your executive clients.
Absolutely.
And understanding, again, at both sort of extremes is, well, what are your non-negotiables? What are you looking for? What do you want to do? How are you different? The personal brand stuff. There's so much that you can go through with people. Sure. And so I think the approach is always differentiated. That's what I love about the way that I approach outplacement support. It's not like a sausage machine, right? Yeah. Session 1 is this, session 2 is that, session 3 is the other. I want to know, what does the individual need? And within the budget that we've got, we'll make that work.
So it's a totally fresh approach to each individual. It's a proper bespoke solution.
Yeah, because they're dealing with, and on an individual basis, everybody gets to talk to somebody. There's no kind of portals or any of that. That has its place, don't get me wrong, that has a place. But for me, it's about that individual support and that connection, and knowing that you've got somebody in your corner and somebody on your side who's going to be working through the next weeks or months with you.
Absolutely. Okay, so from an organisation perspective, then, June, particularly at the moment, we've got this recession either looming, or we might already be in it. I try not to take too much notice of what's going on in the negative mainstream media, but I suppose businesses would, most businesses are trying to keep cash in the business at the moment. If they, are needing to, or they might need to in the future, shed staff for whatever reason, that they're using things like outplacement support, that there is a cost attached to it. So from the company's point of view, what are the sort of benefits to them? I mean, they're going to be spending money when possibly at a time when the business is trying to reduce costs, but there are some real positives for businesses in looking after employees as they exit the business, as well as when they're coming in. So in terms of return on investment, that's not always a financial return on investment. It can do, but those sort of figures are more sort of intangible, I think. But what are the sort of range of benefits for an organisation investing in outplacement?
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned at the start about being part of kind of a people-focused people strategy, and in a sense, and this sounds kind of odd, but outplacement support can be part of that retention strategy, because in a redundancy situation, and these a restructuring can go on for a number of weeks or a number of months, and it creates uncertainty, and in uncertainty, some of your top talent who might already be thinking about looking elsewhere may be inclined to actually make a decision and think, right, okay, this place is there's too much going on for me here, I'm going to go. And actually the way the whole process is being handled, and the fact that people aren't getting any support, and I've sat next to this one of my colleagues now for 10 years, and they're just being kind of cast aside, and I don't like the way the company's handling all of this. So it's not just about supporting the individual and what outplacement support can do for the individual, but outplacement support can impact other people within the organization, because they will be observing what's going on, and they will be seeing how this is being handled. So I think it can play a part in that sort of retention piece. It can also impact on employee engagement, say during periods of uncertainty. And also, if people see that a company is doing the right thing, even in difficult circumstances, as you quite rightly say, most restructuring is to reduce cost. And so why would you go and throw money at something when you're trying to keep an eye on your cost base? But that investment goes far beyond just what it's doing for the individual. And then employees, they're a fantastic source of being an advocate for your organization.
Yes.
And so, all these people who are going out into the big wide world, talking about what it was like when they worked for that particular company, people with the wonders of social media now will have no problems voicing their opinions on whatever channel they see fit. So it's so easy for that opinion to get out there that impacts on company brand, on reputation. So if you want to be seen as an employer that does things right and does things properly and is fair, and that people matter right until the day that they actually exit the door and after, because you care about what happens to them after, that's going to come full circle and then enable you to, when you're ready, recruit people, because it's all part of the brand and your approach. And values-led businesses who actually are values-led and don't just have it kind of slapped on a wall somewhere, they will invest in outplacement support and see it as a part of the employee life cycle, just like you would your induction, as you said at the start, investing all this time in recruitment and induction. It's about creating lasting impressions, and doing things well. And what price can you put on company brand and reputation, particularly in a difficult recruitment market where you're looking to attract people? So I think there's lots to be said for making that investment over and above that, it's just the right thing to do. You know, if you were in that situation, wouldn't you want to be treated in that way? And that's, you know, that's when I was, you know, working in my HR roles, that was part of my kind of ethos, is that I would treat people in the way that I'd want to be treated. And so I think if you've ever been in that situation, you'll realize just what redundancy is like, and how vulnerable it can make people feel. And so having support kind of, you know, is something that you wouldn't hesitate to do.
Yeah, that's really, you know, there's such a profound sense of a sort of, it's almost like a social responsibility, isn't it? You know, and I think you know, there's so many businesses that have, at times, it almost seems like revolving doors. You know, there's just people in, people out, people, and the constant cost of recruitment, training, the disruption that it causes. You know, it's great to have, you know, new employees coming into a business, whether it's through growth or, you know, just natural replacing people that have left. It's great to have that fresh impetus, but it can also sour very, very quickly. And those new people coming in, you know, whether they're in a boardroom or whether they're in a, you know, a team of first line managers or in the shop floor or somewhere else behind the scenes, you know, everybody comes into a business with the best intentions and, you know, a plan. And, you know, if it doesn't take long for the real culture of a business to come to the surface. And I found this myself in jobs in the past working for the people. Yeah, normally, you know, the first sort of month, most businesses are fairly good at hiding the things that they wouldn't want to scare off a new employee with. And, you know, most businesses aren't perfect. This is the world we live in. I get that. But it just amazes me that, you know, there is that sort of reticence by many organizations, and sometimes it's an individual department manager or an individual functional director, sometimes a CEO. They know they've got issues. They know they've got churn or attrition, as we like to call it. But it's that almost that sort of state of denial that, well, don't really want to deal with that, so we'll just employ more people. And I think you know, that message, you're right. You know, when people leave, you know, there's things like Glassdoor and a number of, you know, social media platforms these days. There's nothing worse than a bad reference or some bad negativity about a company. So that, you know, the amount of money that businesses could save just by treating their people a little bit better, looking after them on the way out, that will increase their pipeline probably to get people in the business in the first place. So yeah, I haven't had outplacement support myself, but I absolutely, I'm a strong advocate for it, and it's a great resource both for the individual and the business, really. So okay, so what sort of options are there if you were a business potentially that might either have an impending need for reducing workforce or a particular position, or a business that might want to, you know, just get prepared for that scenario? You know, it's that risk mitigation, it's the what if scenario. What sort of options are there for businesses, June, typically?
So I guess it depends on the scale and those individuals that are impacted. So typically, group support is one option. That if you're making large numbers of people redundant, group support is more cost effective naturally. That can be supported by individual support as well. So, you know, I run career transition workshops and then follow those up with some one-to-one support and group coaching. So there's kind of a blended approach if it's a volume piece that somebody's looking at. If it's smaller numbers or individuals are more senior, then generally that's one-to-one support.
Okay.
In my experience, it doesn't really work to have too many extremes of hierarchy in one room, because these situations, people are, you know, they're not in the best frame of mind. And if you've got somebody sitting in the room who is, you know, the supply chain director, and you've got somebody who is a warehouse assistant, you just wouldn't put them in the same room because the dynamics just wouldn't work.
Yeah.
So generally, more senior people tend to have one-to-one support. Or if you're only making 1 or 2 redundancies because you're either a small business or it's just a small team that's been impacted, then individual support generally tends to be most popular in that situation, because you're not going to get 2 people in a room and kind of try and do some kind of group coaching. I wouldn't recommend that. Just don't think it would work.
Okay, and what sort of trends are you seeing from your customers who use your outplacement services at the moment?
So at the moment, what I've seen is that there's lots of individual support being offered. So the clients that come to me, and I love to work one-to-one. That's always my preference, to work one-to-one. And that's what I enjoy. I recognise that doesn't suit everybody because of budgets and as I said before, because of numbers. But I see a lot of clients for people at in entry-level jobs. They're still wanting to give them some support. They'll still want to offer something. And in terms of the services that I offer, that kind of entry-level support will be the practical stuff. So kind of get your CV updated, get your LinkedIn profile ready, and have some job search support. So that's the trend that I'm seeing. I was with a client over the summer who was making a large number of people redundant, and that was group support that I went down, and I did that face-to-face. And there was an option to do it online, and I said I'd rather come and be in the room, because there's only so much you can do in these situations. When it was COVID, we had no choice and we made the best of it. But I would always prefer to be with somebody, to be with a group of people, sorry. But everything else, one-to-one, is done remotely, because that just works for everybody. It's more convenient. It's more cost effective. And if someone has an interview lined up, in 2 days' time, it's going to be a lot easier to get time with me online than it would be if we were doing it face-to-face.
Yeah, that's understandable. Good. Okay. So I know you're a strong advocate, June, for authenticity, which is one of it's probably my biggest passion or value, if you like. You've posted a number of times on LinkedIn about the importance and benefits of accepting who you are, and that we should embrace our individuality, with all of our flaws. How big a factor can authenticity be in the case of individuals that are trying to rebuild their career, for example?
Yeah, I mean, it's huge, isn't it? And in a redundancy situation, it can be difficult to get to that place of knowing that despite this redundancy isn't about me, it's about my job. And that's so important, that people can create that distance, that it wasn't anything you did. The redundancy happened to you, not because of you. And helping people to get to that place of all the skills and experience and knowledge, and importantly, the way that you do things is what makes you unique. And being able to understand that, I mean, that word personal brand sounds a bit icky, but we all have a personal brand in the way that we show up. So I love to help clients to try and understand that more. And to allow them to have that insight into the fact that they are enough, and that they can go out into the job market and they can secure something. I've not worked with anybody in the last 3 years that hasn't found another job. There's nobody I've worked with that's unemployable. So that is part of why I love working one-to-one, because you can really connect with people and help them to see that. And even when we're preparing for interviews, kind of at the end of a session, I'll say to them, just smile and be you, and I know that sounds like a bit naff, but it's totally true, because you're going to go out into the job market or go to an interview trying to be somebody else. I mean, that's just so hard, and it's draining, and it's not really going to show you in the best light. But if you just turn up as your authentic self, and yes, there's certain things you need to do in an interview, and we go through all of that. I get that. But getting to that place of, as you say, knowing that you're enough, it can take a long time for some clients that I work with, but it's really important when you're going out into the job market to have that confidence and to be that authentic person.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for sharing your thoughts on that. I often think of the scenario where people are. I think some people don't intend to be someone that they're not. They don't intend to be inauthentic, but when you're trying to, some people will clearly, they need to get that job, they need to impress somebody, but they sort of can go about it in the wrong way, in that, you are trying to come across in a way that's not totally you, Well, that for me, it's like acting. Now, some people are great actors, but others, well, even great actors need to practice, don't they? They need to practice their lines. They need to totally believe in the character that they are. So, you know, I think they just naturally make it harder for themselves by not just being happy in their own skin and accepting who they are, and you know, accepting the situation they're in as well. You know, you can't go in reverse. We can't go back in time. So it's that realization of, well, this is the situation I'm in. However, this is what I'm doing to move forward and get out of it. And people are generally a lot happier. And I know I am. I am so much happier these days. You know, in the last sort of 4 or 5 years, I've embraced my flaws, I've embraced my authenticity, and I'm really so happy in my own skin. And it just, you know, a bad day to me these days, if I have one, is no big deal. You know, everything's manageable. So, you know, I'd say to anybody, you know, back yourself, be yourself. Yeah, look, try and work on any sort of weaker areas, if you like, of your skill set, but don't try and change you, the person, because I think it's deeper than that. We are who we are. We can improve a little bit, but to totally change, I don't actually think that's possible. You know, I think we just need to be who we are and let the greatness come out.
Yeah, that point about acceptance is hugely important. Acceptance of the situation and the notion that you can react or you can respond. And naturally, in a redundancy situation, a reaction is what comes first. And it's hard to control that. As I said before, I was that person. I've been that person. I reacted because, you know, I felt like everything was being threatened. But we always have a choice how we can respond. And I think helping individuals to move through that as well is really important. Yeah,
absolutely. So another sort of area of synergy that we have, June. I know you're a keen collaborator. I understand that you've been running a coaching community with Rachel McNidder for about 4 years. So tell me about that, and how can others benefit from maybe setting up their own similar groups? Because this doesn't just apply to coaching or HR. It could be for any discipline, and actually useful for listeners to the podcast in the manufacturing sector too.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I went along to the group when I first decided I was going to give self-employment a go and wanted to find a group, you know, as we do, because it can be quite isolating if you're just out on your own. So I went along to the group and I instantly connected with the people that were there. I mean, I just loved spending time with that community. And then I got more involved, and then Rachel asked me to join her in sort of leading the group. So I think that there's benefits, whatever your specialism, whatever your industry, whatever your sector, whatever you're kind of interested in spending time with people who have similar interests. And particularly from a self-employment perspective, as I say, it can feel lonely, it can feel isolating, but knowing that there are communities and groups out there who will welcome you with open arms and be that place where you can, say, collaborate, when you can support, where you can share ideas, where you can just ring somebody and say, can I just bounce this off you? Or I've just had a difficult conversation or a difficult day, or whatever it might be. So I think I see that a lot within the HR community, that there are these wonderful communities popping up, and they'll have I guess the sense of purpose and the commonality is that they want to create a community of support. But also what we do in our coaching group, and I see this as well in other groups, is that it's about adding value. So the way that we go about it is that we are a supportive community, but every month when we meet online mostly, but we do meet face-to-face still as well, we'll want to add some value to people for their coaching practice or their coaching business, and really understanding, if you are going to set up a community, what's the purpose, what are your objectives, who's in that community, and how would they benefit from you kind of, you know, getting together, as it were. Yeah. And so I think, you know, you can do that informally, you know, the wonderful world of WhatsApp groups, or you can do that more formally with kind of memberships and things. We don't do that. We just say people can come along to a session whenever they feel like it and kind of, you know, show up and take part. So yeah, I think it's particularly now that we're working mainly from home, people are working, you know, in hybrid working, it can feel lonely and isolating, and to have a group outside maybe of your normal kind of work family, your work colleagues, I think there's lots of benefits.
And what's your group called?
We're called Coaching Central because we are
Central
Midlands. Yeah. So we're for any professional coach on any stage of their journey. They can come and find out more about us. And yeah.
Brilliant. I love the collaboration piece. Okay, so just focusing on you and your business then for a second, June. You've been growing Wildwood Coaching since 2018. Crikey, it seems so long ago.
Yeah.
How would you describe your journey, and what are your plans for 2023?
I still feel like I'm learning, which in some ways you kind of think, oh, well, after 4 years, would you have got to a place where, you kind of know what you're doing? But in a way, I always want to feel like I'm learning, because that's what's interesting and that's what's exciting. And that's what makes me every day want to do something towards building my business or working with clients and helping individuals. So I think that sense of excitement and that sense of there's still more to learn, that there's always more to sort of go at, as it were, has kept me going and still does. And sometimes I sort of think, oh yeah, you run a business, don't you? Because it wasn't something I ever thought I would do. And I'm not doing one of these kind of humble boasts around, oh my goodness, but I genuinely looked at other people who run businesses and thought, well, you must have been born like that, or you must be like, you must have super special powers or something, because that's not me. So to think that I'm doing this and enjoying it, and that word successful is hugely loaded, but for me, the what I set out to do, I guess I'm doing it. And so plans for 2023, that's a good question, Joe. I should have a long list, shouldn't I? My honest answer is I haven't really thought about it yet. So that's not for another few months, isn't it? We're only in September.
Yes, absolutely. Well, it strikes a chord with me, because I was going to say, as a small business owner as well, I often find myself wrapped up in working in the business when I probably could do with spending a little bit more time working on the business. Different skill set, and you've got to be in a certain frame of mind, and all the working on the business bit, I sometimes lack that creativity. Sometimes you know that you need to do a strategy on something, but you've been so tied up delivering for customers, your just mind's shifted into a different zone, and it's not the right time. And I do find that a struggle sometimes. So yeah, really interesting to sort of find out how you balance that. How do you juggle that? I mean, because there is that element of guilt sometimes as to, I really should be doing more on the business, but it's have needs must, and before you know it, you're working on another customer project. And those great plans, the things that you get really excited about to maybe push your business forward to the next level, they take a back seat. And I really find that frustrating myself sometimes. But hey ho, it's nice to have business and paying customers. So I suppose it's not all bad. But yeah, how do you get around that?
Yeah, I mean, there's a level of discipline involved, I think, and certainly I'm not going to say that I've got it all worked out, because I haven't. But I think when there's an opportunity where the times are quieter, because we all have those times, and
yep.
The notion of famine and feast, or whatever they want to call it, is taking those quieter times as an opportunity and seizing that opportunity to spend time just reflecting and planning. But also during the week, so I try and keep Fridays as a day when I wouldn't have client-facing work, unless somebody's got something urgent where they need support. So I tend to use Fridays as an opportunity for reflection. I tend to do some social media stuff on Fridays and think about what I might be posting next week. But I don't tend to plan too far ahead, really. I don't know. Maybe that's wrong. Or maybe not. But I've got goals and things that I'd like to achieve. But the way that I approach goals is I set them as intentions. So they're not something that's I don't have it written on my wall. It's not something that weighs heavy on me. It's an intention. So I will set those intentions, and I will say, this is what I'd like to achieve next year. And knowing that I've got those in my mind, it kind of tends to work. Well, it has done for the last 4 years. Who knows what next year will bring? So absolutely. I think it is hard to be disciplined around carving out that time, but trying to protect some time during the week where you will, as you say, work on the business as opposed to in the business, I think is what every business owner needs, just to get your head out of the day-to-day, really.
Absolutely. Well, whatever you're doing, it's working for you. You know, you've had some really good growth over the last 4 years, and I know you work collaboratively, and you've got a good network of associates as well, haven't you? So you've got a good, you know, level of support within your business. So you seem to be in a really good place.
Oh, thank you, Jeff. Yeah, well, it's important to enjoy what you do, and that's the most important thing for me, and I do really, really enjoy it. And we'll just see where next year takes us.
So brilliant. Well, that really wraps up today's episode. June, I hope you've enjoyed our discussion. It's been really interesting and insightful for me, as always. So thank you very much for joining me. Thanks everybody for listening, and look out for the next episode of Insights for Manufacturing. See you next time, and bye-bye.